We're joined by the South African National Editors Forum Executive Director, Reggie Malusi. A very good morning to you, and thanks for making the time.
Good morning, Desiree. Thanks for having us.
Let's remind our viewers about the importance of this day.
Look, it's an important day, and I don't think it's an important day only for the media. It's also an important day for our political history as South Africans. We must remember that it was not only pro-verite, the wealth and weekend wealth that were banned. There were also 19 other political organizations that were mostly black consciousness movements that were banned for violating the then Security Act. And Jimmy Kruger was quite forthright, and he was hell-bent on cracking down on those. And all these came as a result, really, of the coverage of the death of Steve Biko the month before, on the 12th of September. And newspapers, and Percy Qoboza particularly, was forthright in his writing, and he was critical of the government of the day. So 45 years on, it's a day that we can't forget. It's a day that reminds us that we can't undermine how the key role the media plays to this day in our constitutional democracy.
45 years on, SANEF finds itself dealing with issues such as having to issue media statements about condemning the serving of summons on Karen Mon by former President Jacob Zuma's legal team. How would you say that the issues of then and now, how would you juxtapose them?
I can simply say to you, Desiree, and your viewers, that the struggle continues, really. I mean, the struggle of Percy Qoboza back then, when media freedom was violated, we still see it to this day, although journalists are not being jailed. I mean, we take into cognizance what President Ramaphosa wrote in his weekly newsletter on Monday morning. But over and above what he wrote, we are well aware that media freedom in South Africa, there's still violations. I mean, the example in point that you are pointing out of Karen Mon, it's a classic case of the media being intimidated, a journalist being bullied, and people wanting to subject us into silence and wanting to stop us from doing our work. Hence, our statement was quite clear. Hence, we came in as amicus on this case, because we believe that these are the fights that we have to keep on fighting as SANEF, and we will keep on fighting those fights. And I mean, over and above that, if you look at the other cases in relation to media freedom, we have a whole lot of our women journalists who are being bullied, particularly online, particularly on a platform such as Twitter, where they are called all kinds of names. So we still have that. We are still concerned about the safety of journalists in South Africa, where we have undertaken to train them. So those are some of the few examples that we can cite where we say, yes, there are no journalists being killed in South Africa. There are no journalists that are being jailed. But I can assure you now, Desiree, that by the time we do the World Press Freedom Index for next year, during World Press Freedom Day, some of these cases are going to count against South Africa when it comes to media freedom.
You speak of journalists that are being bullied on social media. In an era of a concept called fake news, how do the viewers, the listeners, the people who are consuming this content, how do they discern between the right and the wrong?
Look, disinformation has played a huge role, particularly on online platforms. And disinformation has really presented a number of headaches for us as a fraternity. It's a headache that to this day we are still saying South Africans, in terms of their media consumption, well, the majority of South Africans are not stupid, and they know where to go, and they know which reliable news sources to go to. They know that, you know, there's the agenda on SABC channel 404 that I can go to and watch if I want reliable, up-to-date news. So that's what South Africans do. But over and above that, to answer your question, fake news continues, disinformation, misinformation continues, and those two, we will continue fighting them. We'll continue working closely with organizations such as Media Monitoring Africa, where we are trying to unpack solutions to say, let's continue educating a greater number of South Africans, really, where we educate them to say, this is how you separate fact from fiction. These are the facts and these are the myths. And, you know, we have great organizations like Africa Check, who most newsrooms use as a tool to really check for facts, to really check, is this really factual, is this really true? So the fight continues on disinformation, and it's a long road ahead, and we are quite encouraged that organizations such as the GCIS on government side are also coming on board to work closely with us on that.
Yeah, of course, under that theme, media freedom for all or for some. Of course, we asked our viewers today to join us in the conversation, and we asked them, today's Media Freedom Day of South Africa, what does media freedom mean to you? I'm talking to an executive director at SANEF, Reggie Malusi, but let's just take a look, Reggie, and I hope you can listen in on some of those tweets that have come through. IH Nazo says, good morning, guys. Celebrating freedom of media is limited because journalism has been tainted by sectors and individuals who pay journalists do favors for them. Above all, we have a crisis of gossip media and sectoral journalism in this world. That's IH Nazo for you. Let's take a look at what Simpiwe Soluchwai says. In South Africa, media people are politicians masquerading as journalists. That's Simpiwe for you. Alpha Mahaule says, in South Africa, media freedom means journalists can just barge into grieving black people's living rooms, but never do the same to white people who've lost their loved ones. Maybe we should call it apartheid media freedom, because that's what we have in this colony. I don't know if you heard those. Reggie, is there any truth to the racial tones in how we cover stories?
Not at all. Not at all. I think we have moved from that. We have moved from really racializing, say, crime perpetrators, I mean criminals. We have moved from that. And then if ever there are racial tones, I'd encourage the viewer there to approach an organization like the Press Council, BCCSA, to lay those complaints. Because I think as an organization and as editors and journalists in this country, we are quite clear that no racism will be tolerated in our news entities. So that claim, I would have loved him to cite an example of how that was done and which media house did that, and if ever he later complained. But I mean, from what we consume on a daily basis in terms of media in South Africa, I don't see any racial profiling or any favoritism towards a certain racial group and then treating it better than the other.
And as SANEF, as you go through your deliberations about the media landscape in South Africa, what are your thoughts about how the quality of journalism, the factualness and the balance in stories that are reported by the different media practitioners in the country, whether it's press or broadcasting?
Look, I mean, if you look at before COVID and what COVID has done to the industry, let's start there. The industry has gone through a lot in the past decade. I mean, if you read the latest report that was produced by Vets Journalism, the state of the newsroom, that says a decade back, South Africa had close to 10,000 working journalists. Now, 10 years later, that's been halved to 5,000. So we have seen also during COVID how retrenchments at media houses such as the SABC, Media 24, the closing of several titles at Kexton, that has negatively impacted the industry, where jobs were losses, where revenues dropped. So newsrooms are working and doing the most with a bare minimal, as you may know. That bare minimal simply says we need to produce quality journalism But ask anyone around the world, they will tell you that quality journalism doesn't come cheap. Quality journalism is quite expensive, and quality journalism being expensive, it means you need to hire journalists able to do the work. But in terms of the quality, I think, not that I'm speaking positively on behalf of South African media, I think a great job nonetheless is still being done by our media fraternity. Yes, there are pockets and pockets of where the ball has been dropped, where journalists fail to get the basics. But as we said, there are bodies where people can go and approach those bodies to complain. But if you ask me in terms of 100%, I can say the quality of journalism in South Africa is at a comfortable, what? I can say 90%.
What are your thoughts about that tweet by Simpiwe Soludzwai saying journalists in South Africa, media people are politicians masquerading as journalists?
Yeah, let's deal with that tweet. And then there was another tweet before that we can also deal with regarding ethical journalism. I think we have always been clear as an organization to say we are journalists, and we are not going to regard ourselves as politicians or as part of a certain faction. And yet again, I would have loved him to cite an example of which journalist does he think or does he view as a politician. That can help, so that we can sort of zoom into that certain journalist and analyze the kind of work that journalist or that media house does. But from where I'm sitting, my understanding is that, journalists and the media in South Africa are consistent. If we look at how the media generally treats, say, the governing party, the media has been consistent to say there is a governing party in the seat of government, and we need to question that party. We need to call it into account. We need to be independent of any politician at all times. I mean, sitting presidents in this country since our constitutional democracy, I don't remember any sitting president that was ever not been criticized by the media. The media has been consistent to say if there's a sitting president, they will always zoom into the work of that sitting president and criticize the sitting president. Even the current president did say on Monday morning to say even he gets scrutinized in terms of the decisions he takes, and sometimes the lack of decisions that he fails to take, and the work that he and his government does. So I think as a media, we are, you know it better than me. You can attest to that, where we say, if there's a politician and that person is calling himself a journalist, please show me that person so that we can analyze and see how we can sort that one out.
Reggie Malusi, as always, lots to talk about, but this is where we'll end it. Thank you so much for your time. Mr. Malusi is the Executive Director at the South African National Editors Forum.